Hi guys, welcome back. Today we'll analyze the 5th and the 6th chapter of Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. Let's start.
First of all, these two chapters form a pivotal hinge in the novel's opening movement. Together they complete Don Quixote's first, disastrous sally into the world, and establish the central mechanisms through which Cervantes explores his great theme: the collision between illusion and reality. The 5th chapter opens with Don Quixote lying helpless on the road, unable to move after his beating at the hands of the merchant's servants. Rather than confronting his situation with clear eyes, he immediately retreats into the literary world that has consumed his mind. He begins reciting ballads from the chivalric tradition, first identifying himself with Baldwin, the wounded knight of the wood, and later with the captive Moor Abendares from Jorge de Montemayor's Diana. These are not passing fancies. They are total substitutions of identity. Don Quixote does not merely draw inspiration from these figures. He becomes them, speaking their words as if they were his own, and perceiving the world around him through their stories.
This dynamic reaches its most comic and poignant moment when his neighbor Pedro Alonso arrives to help him. The peasant is a figure of plain, practical common sense, and the exchange between them is one of the novel's most philosophically charged. When Pedro tells him plainly, "I am not the Marquis of Mantua, but Pedro Alonso, your neighbor," Don Quixote's reply is remarkable. "I know who I am, and I know that I may be not only those I have named, but all the 12 peers of France." This is not simply confusion. It is a declaration of radical self-invention. Don Quixote claims a self that exceeds any single identity, one that can contain multitudes drawn from the heroic tradition. Cervantes is doing something profound here. He is asking what identity actually is, and whether a man who knows the difference between illusion and reality is necessarily more fully human than one who transcends it through imagination.
The journey home on the back of an ass, a deliberately unheroic image, is laden with irony. Don Quixote arrives in the village under cover of darkness, not as a triumphant knight, but as a bruised, babbling eccentric. The housekeeper and niece's distress, and their immediate instinct to blame the books of chivalry, introduces the novel's broader social concern: the dangerous power of fiction over impressionable minds.
Now, in Chapter 6, while Don Quixote sleeps, the curate and the barber carry out a scrutiny of his library. Effectively, a literary trial and auto da fe. This chapter is one of the most celebrated in the novel for its meta-literary dimension. Cervantes uses the voice of his characters to deliver a sweeping survey and critique of the Spanish literary tradition of his time.
The scene operates as a parody of the Inquisition, with the curate playing judge and the housekeeper acting as zealous executioner, hurling condemned volumes from the window into the yard. Yet Cervantes is clearly enjoying himself. Several books receive unexpected mercy. Amadis of Gaul, Palmerin of England, and Tirante el Blanco are praised with genuine enthusiasm. Tirante in particular earns extravagant admiration, because its knights eat and sleep and die in their beds. That is, because it engages with a recognizably human reality, rather than pure fantasy. This is a significant moment. Cervantes is sketching his own aesthetic ideal of fiction grounded in life. The chapter also contains a famous self-referential joke. When the barber produces La Galatea by one Miguel de Cervantes, the curate calls its author "a great friend of mine" and gives it a conditional pardon. It shows invention but resolves nothing, and must await a promised second part. Cervantes is winking at his reader, inserting himself into the fiction as both author and character, undermining the boundary between the world of the novel and the world outside it.
Read together. These chapters establish Don Quixote as a novel that is simultaneously about literature and about the human need for narrative. Don Quixote's madness is not mere foolishness. It is a hypertrophy of the storytelling impulse that exists in all of us. The books burned in Chapter 6 are the same books that created the man in Chapter 5. Destroying the library will not restore the man, just as reason alone cannot extinguish imagination. Cervantes seems to suggest that fiction is both dangerous and irresistible, capable of unmaking a person's grip on reality, while also giving life a shape and grandeur it could never otherwise possess.
The two chapters also quietly establish the novel's essential tension between the individual and society. Don Quixote's neighbors, the curate, the barber, the housekeeper, and the niece all represent communal norms and practical wisdom. They mean well, but in their eagerness to cure him, to burn the books, to restore the quiet gentleman Señor Quixote, there is also something reductive and even violent. The world insists he come back down to earth. He insists on flying.
Please like and subscribe if you want to support the channel.